up and howl about America and democracy. There is no America. There is no democracy. We no longer live in a world of nations and ideologies. The world is a college of corporations, inexorably determined by the immutable bylaws of business. The world is a business. And I have chosen you to preach this evangel.
For all my free market healthcare robbing, stock stealing, retirement fund fucking with niggas. Fuck you little credit card scamming, jewelry stealing, crack selling, liquor store robbing motherfuckers. Shout to the homies, Carnegie, OG, Willie Randolph Hearst, Baruch, Rockefeller, the real Rockefeller, my main bitch Leona, pour out a little Louis XIII, Scott Rothstein, Jack Abramoff, hold your head, my real shop niggas, let's get this money. I spend my day peppering America overseas, pension for the workers, nigga please, embezzlement, etiquette, private settlement, I'm better with Confederate rhetoric from my mansion in Connecticut, foreclosed with it, closed as a tenement, I twist words like a speech impediment, I hope you got good credit bitch, if not better get a new job with benefits, while I play golf with niggas and get cheddar with, new money buys brand new carrots, my old money bunch of great grandparents, you got grills in your mouth, I ain't mad at ya, I own every gold mine in South Africa, thanks baby you made me a billion, plus I own a building, but each one of my children's children.
Kurdistan to Damascus, the Syrian situation in depth. Voice of Rebellion with Chris J on UCY.TV. We got bad background noise there, brother.
Hey everybody, this is Chris J here, and we are live. Welcome.
All right.
That's not supposed.
All right, I think we're in the clear now.
Okay. Thanks everybody for tuning in to this edition Voice of Rebellion Radio. We're talking about the Syrian situation, which I've covered many times. It's one of my, I guess, expertise subjects that I really cover a lot. And we're going to really have a lot of facts that are going to go on the show. Might rant again, like I did last week. And callers are welcome. So definitely try, if you want to put in your 2 cents, try to call in or do it through the chat room. We have the chat room there. If you're too shy to actually call in, which I don't know what's the big deal. As long as you're respectful, as long as you actually let me talk, I will be calm, respectful, and let you talk, and it'll be pleasant. I've had quite a bit of callers over all these shows, and not too many. I mean, it doesn't seem like maybe 1 or 2 I could actually fault to myself for actually going bad. There's been some angry callers that it was ultimately their fault. They just started yelling out of nowhere. But I'm usually respectful and just looking for dialogue back and forth when I have a caller on. But Syria, Damascus, the Kurdistan, the Aleppo, the Raqqa, Syria right now is in the midst of a civil war that's turned rather foreign at this point. And these countries, Turkey, Saudi Arabia, Israel, United States, Russia, Iran, on different sides, but all these countries are all involved in the Syrian war one way or another with direct involvement. The Turkish have sent troops into Syria. The Saudis have threatened a full-scale invasion. They probably have special ops in there. They actually have special ops in there. The Iranian are helping the Assad's forces fight the terrorists and ISIS terrorists, but also the Syrian moderate rebels in quotations with the other terrorists. The Russians have helped and are still helping the Syrian army do the same task. The United States has been involved in funding, arming different groups on the so-called opposition in Syria, but really the terrorist front in Syria. And the United States' special ops group, boots on the ground, airstrikes, and probably somewhere between around 500 to 1,500 soldiers probably. Something like that. It's a pretty small number, but there's more American boots on the ground in Syria that are doing isolated skirmishes and stuff like that. And we also have the Israelis that have done back and forth while they're occupying part of Syria, and people forget about it. The Golan Heights they occupy, which belongs to Syria, but has a lot of natural gas, so the Israelis won't let it go. And it's also a staging ground for the Israeli operations in Syria. They've done illegal airstrikes against the Syrian Arab Army. They've done illegal attacks. However, they never seem to attack ISIS. And it's very questionable because ISIS shares a border with the Golan Heights, and they've been seen running back into the Golan Heights in Israel and running all the way back into Israeli territory, and even being treated in hospitals inside of Israel. And it's no miss that also the Israelis have been caught on video. They've been training these ISIS soldiers. So what is going on here is definitely a Western sponsoring of terrorism to take out a leader that's not playing the ball game. And the leader that is Assad, who's not playing into the international banking scheme. So they want to take out Assad, and they've done it by funding these terrorists like they've done since the 70s. Has been the U.S. MO in the Middle East. Was the Mujahideen were the first groups to really be funded by the United States government in such a manner where they took down the Soviet support of Afghanistan and brought in the Taliban to power when the Soviet support of Afghanistan fell apart in 92, and then the Taliban took power, who we later would justify a war because we said that the Taliban was in charge of Afghanistan, but we brought the Taliban to be in charge of Afghanistan. And then later we put in this puppet state that Afghanistan became. And also another thing that people have forgotten about this whole Middle Eastern wars, and I want to emphasize this, is that these Middle Eastern wars are classified. Well, the Iraq War in 91 and this recent, I think also this recent war can be classified as a nuclear war. And if people say, well, there's no nuclear weapons used, so how is this nuclear war? But there was nuclear weapons used. They just weren't the kind of hydrogen nuclear weapons or anything like that. But when you look at it, they used depleted uranium all through 91 during their bombardment of Iraq, and used a ton of depleted uranium. And they used it for everything. And on the many of the bombs, they used it it penetrates using the uranium. And the place is completely contaminated. A lot of Iraq, there's talk that Iraq can be changed, it can be saved or whatever. But at this point, it might be a permanent wasteland. And I would suggest anybody that's there to get out, because Iraq is causing a lot of the people a lot of the soldiers that went there are sick, coming home with what's been dubbed Gulf War syndrome, which is a combination of many things. But one of the major elements probably is radiation poisoning. The people that are sick with any ailments, also Gulf War syndrome, and you can bet that that's really a key word for radiation poisoning for these poor Iraqi citizens that had to endure these wars, the first 91 war and then the 03 war. All this depleted uranium has been used, and the same kind of things have been used in Syria by the opposition or the terrorists have been used chemical weapons and very dirty warfare. And that's one of the things that's forgotten about this Middle Eastern warfare. There's a lot of dirty warfare from biological to chemical with the Syrian rebel. And people accused Assad of using chemical weapons when there wasn't any proof by the biased United Nations. They usually are biased towards the West. Said there was no proof that the Syrian rebels had actually used that the Syrian military had used chemical weapons. The only proof that existed of any use of chemical weapons was a pretty decent amount of proof by the Syrian rebels, or we even claimed to have on YouTube put up videos that that they were using chemical weapons, and they boasted about it, that they had these weapons to take out the Syrian government. Who, when you hear the rhetoric about the Syrian government and you hear what they think about the Syrian Christians and minorities and people supporting the Syrian government, and you hear what they have to say, it sounds exactly the same as Al-Qaeda or ISIS rhetoric, calling the Damascus government infidels and stuff like that, and calling them that this is a holy war to take out an unholy regime. They use all kinds of words like that. So it should be no surprise that they actually are under those kind of tendencies of a terrorist organization, the Free Syrian Army, the Islamic Front, and other groups inside of Syria. And I would hope that with all these obvious clues about how also the foreign funding was literally the videotapes to the major media sources now emitting it of not just the moderate Syrian rebels, but I'm talking about, the supposed moderate Syrian rebels, which we had a little bit of a debate on the last show about that. There is no moderate Syrian rebels are a myth, and there is no Syrian rebels fighting ISIS. The Syrian rebels have signed a long-term ceasefire with the ISIS and have been shown to be doing the same objectives. If they were truly fighting ISIS, with the forces that the Syrian rebels do have, there would probably be wrapped up the fight against ISIS a long time ago. But the problem is that you have the United States interfering via airstrikes on Syrian army equipment and stuff like that. So anything that for the counter offensive that they were doing during the ISIS's big offensive, they really were left stuck in the mud, and there was no real there was no real support coming from overseas until really Iran and Russia really upped their efforts. Well, Iran had been around, but when Russia came in, that's when a major power, the most powerful military in the world, started fighting against ISIS, and we saw how quickly they could do it. They did in just weeks, practically made ISIS go from, they were still in a position where they might have been able to keep this fight going for a long time, even recapture some major cities, and now completely done. Looks like that they are in their last, possibly they might be just weeks at this point, or maybe just a few months away from total defeat. Once they're pushed out of Raqqa, their time would be, or their days would be quite numbered, and it would be a very short countdown before the total destruction, until where ISIS is just a fringe group that only has a few members out in the desert, no longer control major cities like they were control. Well, their friends were in control of Aleppo, which is the second biggest city inside of Syria, or second most important city inside of Syria, next to Damascus, which they nearly captured. They were on the suburbs. And in Iraq, the same deal is that at one point they were very close to taking over Baghdad and the entire country even, and they had taken over Mosul and a few other major cities. And Syria and Iraq their fights are very much intertwined, and they're both countries in a heavy state of war. And people forget that Iraq never settled down. People forget that Iraq was practically left a wasteland after the 91 war, and then really finished off after the 03 to current war. It's really never ended because the United States military has never pulled out of Iraq completely, even though that the official operation, Iraqi Freedom, came to an end in 2010, the combat operation ended. It still has left some soldiers in there, and let's not forget about the huge presence of paramilitaries, which is really just the government subcontracting to other people. Instead of the government themselves sending the military to fight, they send subcontractors in there. And the subcontractors' difference is that these people, these paramilitaries, they're paid killers, and they're paid very good money. They're paid over $100,000 a year to do atrocities, and they really operate on a whole different set of rules because they don't really have to follow the Geneva Conventions whatsoever, and they're not expected to. And even though the Geneva Conventions were definitely not held up by the United States Army in Iraq, there's even worse atrocities committed by Blackwater, where they can practically just kill for fun, and they'll rarely get called out on it by anybody, and rarely brought to trial or brought to the ICC. And Blackwater's still running. They went. People said that they went bankrupt. They're still around, and even if they're not, which they are still around, but even if Blackwater was to go completely out of business, it wouldn't be done for paramilitaries. It would still be craft mercenaries. But craft mercenaries, that's another major paramilitary group that people don't really know about, but they're not really a foreign group. They do more domestic affairs. And craft mercenaries are seen as posing as protesters, and usually they're infiltrators, that kind of stuff. And they usually intimidate people at protests. I think craft mercenaries, they were seen like the Fergus events. And they do false flags and stuff like that. Like, it's a very highly rumored that the San Bernardino shooting was done as a craft mercenary operation. And that's the thing about these mercenaries, is that the men that are involved in this kind of stuff are men of such low morals and so low ethics that doing something like that, like a mass shooting and killing innocent people, since they know that the only thing they're worried about is going to jail or actually financial repercussions, they know they're not going to have either of those happen, they'll do it. Now, I'm not saying it's a 100% deal that's how it went down in San Bernardino, but it's definitely a very credible theory. And I didn't really research much of it because I just saw the most important thing was I saw just the agenda that was afterwards and the weeks afterwards of calling for a total gun ban and all that's been crammed down our throat. Really, ever since really it started in '99 when that was '99, right? We're almost coming up on the anniversary, but when those horrific events that wasn't no false flag either, and it was a very horrific event, Columbine, where those older students were shot up there in Colorado, and people say, well, armed guards didn't prevent that shooting from happening. Well, the armed guards probably prevented, hundreds of being killed compared to only 20 or something like that. Well, not only 20, but 20 people who lost their lives in that. And then, of course, the gun control agenda really started being pushed, and then it got really bad after the Sandy Hook. And after that, all these other mass shootings are being, there was always these kind of events happening. People double, and now the definitions also changed. Like the show, every time there's 3 people being killed, they'll call the mass shooting and put it on the media, and they'll go over and over and over, talk about how we need gun control, but they'll never show how these people are all on pharmaceuticals for mental health and stuff like that, and that these people were already in bad mental health, and then after taking the pharmaceuticals, is when they went on some violent rampage. It really irksome to see afterwards, after they talk about how horrible this event was, they'll have one of those pharmaceuticals will be advertised on that on CNN or MSNBC or Fox News or whatever, which I can't stay on to watch all 3 of them anymore. Even though that's the only news I can get. Actually, I don't have like just regular cable. I don't even get like BBC or Al Jazeera. That's closing down. Which that's the supposed alternative. That's what people think is the alternative media, but that's ultimately just 2 other Western media sources that we just don't. They are not really targeted towards Americans, so they're not blasted to us 24/7 like CNN, MSNBC, Fox. Al Jazeera is more for the Arabic crowd, the Gulf states, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, and those kind of countries, and they were doing it in Arabic mainly, like just translate to English for some people to watch it here, and it ultimately fell apart for them. And BBC, of course, to Britain, but they have translated so many languages. Britain, I think BBC has almost like it's right behind CNN for the international effort of brainwashing people around the world, because they do it. BBC has a giant international reach, just like CNN does, another giant international reach. But the good thing is now RT, I think, is competing with those 2 for a larger international reach, but probably not anything like those 2 have. Which RT's not perfect, but it's definitely a lot better than those 2. And there's not the big corporate money going into RT, and it's different. It's a state. The Russia. I think it's like a semi-state owned by the Russian government or whatever. At the same time, they do have quite a bit of time, because I've seen them criticize. I've seen them be supportive of Navalny, who was a critic of the Russian government, which that would be like the equivalent of like CNN or MSNBC being supportive of Edward Snowden, which you never would see, and they always called him a traitor and said that he deserves to be in jail. And call him a Russian agent and stuff like that, which a lot of people in Russia would jump right to that conclusion. Navalny is the American agent, a lot of politicians in Russia and a lot of the media, but RT actually was willing to try to side with them and try to say, well, this is made this, and I think that in a way, you know, even well, it definitely was important for freedom of speech that people like Navalny, maybe not himself, because Navalny was a questionable character, and it's questionable whether if he might be possibly an agent. But it doesn't really matter because all this talk that he'll run for president in 2018, even if he's allowed, he's going to get like 10% of the vote because Putin is so popular. All these people that have been talked about that might be thrown into the ring. I mean, there's even the talk about of an owner of an NBA team who used to be a Russian businessman. He still is a Russian businessman. Is a billionaire, one of the Russian elite that's been trying to take out Putin by many illegitimate means. Prokhorov, I don't know, whatever his fucking last name is. He's been talked about that he might run against Putin in 2018. Of course, the major one, Kordosky, Kordosky's a Russian oligarch that was thrown in jail for many years for corruption and was released. He's literally he literally had a partnership with the Rothschilds in London, and he's now been one of the main people pushing the removal of Putin. And Putin has been, but I think he's been too nice by letting him out of prison. But I feel like I feel like there was been some outside pressure for that, and I think that he shouldn't have succumbed to that outside pressure if that's true. But then again, that doesn't seem very Putin-like. Putin-like would be not succumbing to that pressure, so it's questionable why Kordosky got out so quickly. I guess because the charge wasn't so serious, and he just did this time that it was allotted for his term. They could have gotten him a lot worse things than that, and it was only ultimately a 10 or 11-year term. Kordosky should definitely be sent out of the country like the Rothschilds were and the Soros, where they have arrest warrants after them. I think Kordosky should have if the Russian government's willing to put arrest warrants after the big guys like them, Soros not so much a big guy, but he's still a pretty big guy up in the New World Order ladder. I think they should be able to put Kordosky back in jail, but I guess it would just be a 24/7 backlash against that. So I guess they're just going to figure out a way to deal with him out of jail. Which the way they've dealt with him is just that they let him be him because he's pretty much a crazy man, and everybody knows that he's got the delusions. He thinks he's going to be the next president, and he thinks that somehow he's going to jump from being like 2% popular in Russia to overcome Putin's 90% popularity that he currently has because of all his major things that he's done in this term. And one of the major things I really like is what he's done in Syria. It made Russia feel a lot more safer because nobody talks about on our media who's been one of the major victims of terror attacks over the years. Remember in the 90s, over 300 people died in a terror attack. And remember, all these terror attacks come from Chechnya, belong to the Islamic terrorist groups that the United States pretended not to have supported, but really that they were supporting. And it was kind of like a similar scenario. We're saying, oh, well, we don't support those guys, but we support these guys who are actually, we're going to say that they're fighting those guys you didn't like, but actually they were buddies. And ultimately, they're just funding all of them. Quickly, the lie unravels. With the State Department and the Department of Homeland Security when they talk about terrorism and what the government is involved in. They say, oh, well, we're only involved in supporting the moderate rebels or whatever. But it turns out the moderate rebels are friends with the Islamic terrorists. And then you look back at the history and it finds out that the United States funded all of them from in Syria, all these 40 different terrorist groups that probably exist there, from the Free Syrian Army to ISIS to Islamic Front.
Hey, Chris.
Yeah.
Hey, you've been having really good audio. Now it's getting a bit choppy. So if you're doing something different, go back to what you was doing. It was perfect.
It was just if you heard a big interruptions in the audio there for a second, an alarm went off on everything down here. I guess on Amber Alert or whatever. So that's what that big annoying sound was that probably came across. It's Amber Alert. But let me go sit back down there. But I was standing up for a second. Maybe that when I standing up and was moving around with the tablet, maybe that messes up with the mic or something like that. You got the good audio now? Is it coming across clear now?
Yeah, it was going back and forth there, but go ahead. So yeah, just go ahead, and if it gets bad, I'll tell you. But yours is really coming across good. So
yeah, and if anybody wants to call in, 718-717-8296, 718-717-8296. Yeah, thanks everybody. All new listeners, I guess I never give a shout out to, and there's probably got to be a few every now and then coming into the show, and to those people, give a big thumbs up and tell you to keep listening, keep on the truth train, keep on learning. There's a lot to learn in the truth community, and it's almost incredible when we look back, some of us, and look at all the learning that we've done the last 3, 4, 5 years, 6 years. Some of us have been involved a long time, and I've been involved quite a long time for being just 18 years old, and I've been doing this radio show for over 2 years now, and I still got plenty to talk about. Every week I find some more to talk about, other interesting guests to bring on, and talk about the Syrian situation. Of course, it's just endless news coming out of there, and right now, what the big news that's happening is that now the liberation the Syrian military is attempting to do a final liberation of Aleppo. They've done twice liberated Aleppo. Now they're trying a third time to fully liberate Aleppo, which is the second most important city in Syria. And if they're actually able to take out ISIS and their buddies there in Aleppo, then that would be a major win there, of course, and that would be Damascus and Aleppo free completely, which hasn't been too much of the war where it's been like that. Aleppo was controlled by the rebels for most of the war, and they completely decimated the city during that time. I mean, you just look at Aleppo; it's complete destruction left and right, and it's very sad. That people, we're going to return back to their city, and it's going to be uninhabitable. I mean, and their houses are going to be destroyed. Their lives are going to be flipped upside down. And these Syrian rebels a lot of them are going to escape. A lot of the top leaders are going to probably escape, and ultimately the Syrian government's probably going to be forced to strike some peace deal with them that won't have them going to jail or being executed. They're going to probably run to Qatar or Saudi Arabia in the long run and live nice lives or whatever afterwards. And it's definitely not what they deserve. They deserve some of these men nothing less than being a life in jail or execution. Because what has been done in the Syrian war is some of the worst crimes against humanity that we've seen since World War II. And it's not an exaggeration when you look at what was done to Christians, what was done to the Kurdish by the Syrian rebels and ISIS, what was done to just the Syrian population in general by those groups, and by and not just ISIS, but their buddies over on the supposed moderate rebel side, from beheadings to all these suicide bombings that they've done, to the chemical weapons that they use, and using citizens of Syria as human shields, which was documented to be seen many times. And it's just a tactic, isn't it? Isn't this a tactic of kind of like what the Israelis do, what Saddam did in Iraq? That you take prisoners a lot of times, and you capture and use them as human shields. So it's almost this is worse than what Saddam did. It's really just an Israeli tactic where they take Palestinians and they use them as human shields when they go into neighborhoods, and ultimately a lot of times that they're people that they're fighting and in Palestine. The Israelis are fighting in the occupied territories. A lot of them don't belong to Hamas or anything like that. They're just people defending their houses, defending their families. Some of them belong to Hamas, and Hamas, if you look at the history, looks to be a group that the Zionists weren't too worried about, because it gives them a justification to do the horrible things that they do to Palestinians, the Palestinian people. And it's no surprise that the Zionists would support people with very similar tactics and the same morals as over there in the Syrian rebels that they're supporting. The Zionist connection to the Syrian rebels is not seen by some, and it's really unfortunate when you see people in the anti-Zionist community that are supportive of the Free Syrian Army and such, not realizing that all across the board people realize that the best thing that could happen for Israel is the fall of the Assad regime, because that'd be a neighboring country that actually borders them, that's anti-Zionist, would fall apart, and it'd actually be the last country that borders Israel that's anti-Zionist to fall, and that would make Israel feel a lot more secure than they did before. And there would only be Yemen and Iran really left, the only ones that be that actually fight hard against the Zionist regime. And of course, people say, left or right, that they'll call Assad a terrorist, they'll call Assad barbaric. And unfortunately, there's been a lot. You don't realize that just the ugliness of war, and that ultimately, yes, there's been a lot of accidental deaths by the Syrian Arab Army into the civilian population because of the Free Syrian Army's use of neighborhoods as hiding grounds and using people as human shields, and they intentionally do this. And then later, the Syrian Free Syrian Army they'll say, "Well, look at these people that have been martyred. Look at these people that the Assad killed, even though that they killed them. They were the ones that used it, that put them into the danger and forced them into the battleground." So in the long run, most of the stuff that the Free Syrian Army and the Syrian rebels have claimed about the Syrian military and the Russian forces and the Iranian forces there has been rather false, and they really are the ones guilty of the actions from the chemical weapons, which the Damascus attack that supposedly happened, where the Syrian military used the gas against its own capital, was actually not even the gas never was even dropped. It was actually a psyop from the Saudis that they brought in a camera crew and everything, and said, "Look, everybody, that the Assad has used chemical weapons against the capital," but in reality, it was practically just like a Hollywood film they filmed, and they were caught red-handed within about 2 months of it happening in 2013. Which everybody was talking about that in summer 2013. It really looked like that, like the United States would enter Syria, and it was boiling, and it didn't quite get there. In September 2013, it pretty much fell apart. But then, just within a year later, the United States finds an excuse to come in there, and that was ISIS that they said that they would fight. But what really started happening is that ISIS just made gains in the places that the United States Army mainly targeted, which was eastern Syria, and the United States military wasn't just a failure. The fight against ISIS, what it really was a deliberate support for ISIS against the Assad army, and that should be people should get that through their heads, is that it never was meant to succeed. It was never meant for ISIS to actually be forced to retreat and the place where they attacked. And you see that the place where they still hold up is eastern Syria. Western Syria has been almost practically cleared of ISIS, as now the Syrian government has retaken most of western Syria back, and the Kurdish lands have been taken back, which is soon going to cause a little bit of problems itself, because it's going to lead to I think the United States and Israel using it as a bartering chip, where they're going to say that they're going to probably influence the Kurdish community into trying to split away. That might be the plan B, or definitely maybe even during war tactic that they use, is that in the middle of the war, they will split away Kurdistan from the rest of Syria, and then with a divided Syria and with made the Kurds out of the fight, which they were supportive of Assad for a lot of the war, the Kurds out of it, then they can strike again, and with the United States going with more soldiers and they make a coalition against Assad, they'd be able to take out Assad easily if Kurdistan's removed from the rest of Syria, which Kurdistan's a pretty large area of Syria. The Kurdish minority is pretty important to the future of Syria, and they do need to stay into a unified country, at least at this point. I think they may deserve independence once the war is completely clear, but right now the war is still going on. There might be a supposed ceasefire, but ask a lot of people in Syria, the ceasefire hasn't really came into effect. They're still fighting inside of Aleppo and Raqqa, which Raqqa is the self-declared ISIS capital. So that means that Raqqa, pretty much most of ISIS's commands are coming from Raqqa, and that's a very important battle. It's going to be probably a very long, drawn-out battle, similar to like the Battle of Kobani, lasted 4 or 5 months during the Syrian war, and that was the first battle. That was really the kind of like the. Some people might looking back at it, and it was kind of weird to think when it was going on, that this battle might be the beginning of World War III, because this is when the United States joined in. This is when they became a part of the Syrian war directly, not just by support and arms and all that. And this battle that's went on for like 5 months signified the United States and the Iranian, Syrian forces clashing at each other quite directly. This would signify if this blows up into a war with the United States sending 100,000 in or whatever, and they're going to fight the Syrian and Iranian forces directly, and maybe the Israelis tag along in there with the 100,000 U.S. troops. That would be War III there. And the start of it, the first major battle, would be that one that started all the way back there in September 2014 and ended in January 2015, right there in Kobani, which is a pretty big city. It's like, I think it's the biggest, it would be like the Kurdish capital if the Kurdistan is actually realized, Syrian Kurdistan. Kurdistan's a pretty large region throughout the Middle East. It's in Iraq, it's in Iran, it's in Turkey, and that's where some of the most repressed Kurds are in Turkey. The Kurdish, as you can see, were defended by the Syrian Arab Army rather than in Turkey, where they're heavily repressed and are blamed for practically anything bad that happens inside of Turkey is blamed on the Kurds. And Turkey also felt somewhat of a backlash or somewhat of a backfiring of their policy, which, Turkish now around the world are known to be ISIS sponsors. That's no longer a secret. It's not like the rest of the Saudi part of the equation, or the Israeli or the United States part of the equation. And really, the Saudi part of the equation is becoming more and more obvious. The American part of the equation in many countries has become more and more obvious. And I think the Israeli part of the equation has become more and more obvious. It's just the West that's really blind, and America is really blind to the whole scenario. But Turkey, just all around the world, has been accused of being an ISIS sponsor. Really, Erdogan, not just in his country, has lost a ton of popularity, where he's probably supported by less than 30% of the people, but around the world, he's become one of the least liked leaders. And Turkey has had a few terrorist attacks against it, and it seems to make some terror elements, the same ones they funded, make some parts that they don't really have much control of, rogue elements of the separate rogue elements of ISIS came back into Turkey to strike them. And probably, and that's the backfire. Now their own people are feeling the backfiring of the horrible policy that their government was involved in, and the other Gulf states and the Western countries involved in this policy when it comes to Syria, which is the idea in Syria. And what seems to be the horrible mentality of the West is that better anyone than Assad. The Israelis said that the Israelis said at one point and this that they admitted, is that they'd rather have ISIS in power than Iran, which it shows that ISIS belongs to the West, and that the Iranians are involved in this heavy fight against ISIS, as it's ultimately just really what we're seeing in Syria is a proxy of the Iran versus Israel fight. The Russians are kind of also there in the equation, but they're not really that involved as people think. The amount of damage they were able to do was just 2,000 soldiers or so. It's amazing. That's all that was there. And they just have very good weaponry and airstrikes, and they also had their base of command out of. But those 2,000 soldiers is all that was there. So imagine if they were bringing 100,000 into a war. Let's just say in the future, war breaks out in Ukraine between the EU, Russia, and the United States is back in the EU, or whatever's left of Western Europe in the future. I don't think the EU is going to be an equation in the future. It's just going to be these different Western European countries. So let's say that Germany, obviously that Germany's really showed their true colors, and Merkel would actually rather would rather bow down to Erdogan than stand up for a country and stand up for citizens and their right to freedom of speech. Because look what's happened with scenario with this political cartoonist, that he made what was called a disparaging picture against Erdogan, and then Erdogan tells Merkel, "Well, I want to try him," and Merkel agrees that might be an option. That they'll have the Turkish try him in court, this political cartoonist. So definitely Merkel could be in the future involved with a direct clash with Russia and Ukraine, and then I guess the United States back them up. But imagine those 100,000 Russian troops would do quite a bit. I mean, they could probably smash through the German army just at 100,000 alone. So I guess we can rest assured about the future that they're not going to, the Western countries are not going to push a fight with Russia very easy or very quickly, because we know that there's going to be that's not going to be like taking out Saddam, or it's not going to be like taking out Gaddafi. This could be a major fight that they probably won't win. And if Russia was to get into a world war, we can probably expect that either, well, there's some pretty bad scenarios that can happen. There could be no winners in that. But if there is a winner in that, it's going to be Russia, and the New World Order is going to lose in that scenario. But in Syria, we've also seen that the solidarity for once between Iran and Iraq. As we've seen before, they fought against each other when Saddam was in power. He was supported by the United States, and then they were invading Iran, and Iraq and Iran fought. It was a very ugly war. There was over 1 million dead in the end of that war. And the Iran-Iraq war led to a lot of hostilities between the two countries for a long time afterwards. But now they've shown solidarity with each other in the fight against ISIS. And Iraq, Iran, and Syria are all working together against the Western plan for the Middle East. And I think it's like now you hear this talk in the foreign policy circles and all that, and all these think tanks and all these neocon organizations that made the current government of Iraq needs to be taken out. And they're talking about the same kind of regime change rhetoric they were talking about before they took out Saddam back in 2003. And it seems kind of close to the possibility that the United States government, with their troops that they already have there in Iraq, will be just turn their arms towards the Iraqi military, which they've already done. They've been sabotaging the Iraqi military's efforts to quell ISIS inside their own country. So it's possible that soon they'll just go directly at the current leadership in Iraq and put in somebody that they consider more suitable, as their current plan seems to be backfired, as Iraq and Baghdad has seemed to embrace somewhat Iran. And the Iranian the Iranians, who've been kind of like the most important player in all this, as they've been absolutely crucial to the major victories inside of Syria against ISIS and Al-Qaeda and Al-Nusra and the Free Syrian Army and many other groups. And let me emphasize again is that they're all just different flavors of the same terrorism inside of Syria, Western-backed mercenary Islamic terrorism. They might have all their funny names. They might change their names, like the Free Syrian Army became the Democratic Front for Syria, and that the Al-Nusra became the Arab coalition. But in the long run, Al-Nusra and the Free Syrian Army are all members of that coalition, and they're just all terrorist groups. And this is the spin that the media's been able to put. They've been able to make it seem like that they've been able to change who these people are. They've been able to miraculously turn people that crucify people into a moderate rebel group that is fighting Islamic terrorism inside of the countries. Also, I'll put this out there, is that the Islamic terrorism, these people are not very Islamic. What they do, and a lot of the Islamic community is against them. And Iran and Syria's government that are still Islamic people inside those governments are heavily against what they do. And these people a lot of times are not even from Islamic countries and are not anywhere bit tied to Islam. It's said that somebody is captured inside of ISIS. They said they couldn't even find a Quran laying around. And probably 30% of the ISIS forces are probably covert Israelis or Europeans or some kind of, or even Americans. And that's why they're always covering their faces. It's not really some religious thing. It's more that they're covering their identities because they would be shown as not even to be Middle Easterners and nowhere connected to the region. And there's a lot of top commanders and stuff like that would be seen the same way by the world, and then the whole sham that has been shown on the media would fall apart if they were to show all the Europeans in there and all the Israelis are in there, or also the major one. What about their own leader, al-Baghdadi, or whatever his real name is, which what it seems to be his real name is Shimon Elliott. So Shimon Elliott, that is a Mossad member, has definitely. I think there's been a lot that's been to uncover him, and a lot of internet information, a lot of some now more credible sources have jumped on the theory that even their leader himself might be Mossad. And look what they've done. They have destabilized Syria, they've destabilized Iraq, and they're destabilizing Middle Eastern countries that, or attacking governments and groups that they would be that are truly anti-Zionist and truly regaining popularity inside of the Middle East, like Hezbollah, for example, that's moral enemies of ISIS, and they get into all kinds of fights in Syria and Yemen. They get into a ton of fights. It's Hezbollah and the Houthi government are very closely tied together. It's kind of two similar movements, similar ideologies, which, of course, Hezbollah is very biased towards the Shias. It's like a Shia Islamist group, but they don't resort to terror like ICE does, and it's killing 1,700 people at the same time and mass execution stuff like that. Hezbollah just more uses conventional means of warfare towards the governments or groups that they don't like, for example, such as ISIS or the Syrian rebels. Hezbollah, also to be explained, is not a country's government. They're not the government of Lebanon like people think. They are actually the opposition of Lebanon. In Lebanon, they have just kind of a Gulf state type government, kind of supportive of Saudi Arabia and Qatar and all them. And they kind of have a lot of influence in one region of Lebanon, but they're not actually connected to any. They're not actually in any government in the Middle East, but they have connections or to the Iraqi government, or not the the Iraqi government, really, but the Iranian government, to the Syrian government, to the Yemen government, where they have more ties to. But Hezbollah is all kind of just a broad group all throughout the Middle East. I think they're definitely not a perfect group. They, again, are biased. They're not really pro-Sunni, I don't think. I think they're really pro-Shia only, which ultimately to take out Wahhabism, which that's what these terror groups and groups like ISIS and all these rebels inside Syria really belong to. It's going to take solidarity between the Shia and Sunni populations of the Middle East, which Syria, they've had a lot of that solidarity, and that's, for example, they have 90% of the Assad's army are Sunnis, yet the government of Syria are Shia people, and there's Damascus has a lot of Shias, but the Sunnis work with them because they need solidarity. They've always had a lot of solidarity inside Syria. The minorities get along pretty well because there's also Christians that have joined in the fight, Palestinians, and of course, the Kurdish minority. People forget about the Christian minority inside Syria, and they almost all support Assad and support the Russian fight against ISIS. And people keep blasting on the TVs or like a Fox News, for example, to say that Christians are being massacred. We need to support the rebels, but the rebels are part of the people that are massacring the Christians. It's not being done by Assad. People got that all backwards. In fact, Syria has always had a very large Christian population, and Assad, even though he wasn't a Christian, treated Christians very well over the years with equality, dignity, and many other things. And they were able to be part of the Ba'ath movement to further Syria from a weak third world country into a powerful Arab powerhouse, had a very successful economy, a very successful improvement of standard of living until the war happened in 2011, which I was talking about in the last show, is that people said it was never at peace. But people forget about before 2011, before the rebellion started inside Syria, or what really should be said, instead of rebellion, the insurgency or the foreign funding started. But before that, it was a relatively peaceful, modern country, which is almost like a European country or something like that, like something from West Europe or any country in Europe, where there's some incidents of violence here and there, but there's not terror attacks and stuff like that goes on in Saudi Arabia, where the police kill or people get executed violently for petty offenses. That wasn't going on in Syria. That was going on in America's ally Saudi Arabia and Israel's ally Saudi Arabia. And that's what also I don't like is being said in some Middle Eastern rhetoric, is that they always say, well, we need to support Israel because they're the only civilized ones in the Middle East, is what they say. But they support these regimes like Saudi Arabia, that they always quote as these uncivilized countries where people are being killed for minor offenses or where women are mistreated. Well, the Israelis have a very close relationship with the Saudis. And look what they do to the Palestinians. That's civilized? Killing children, killing old women, and doing all the things that they do to them, and denying them even basic human necessities to assert their dominance over the region.
Hey, Chris.
No, that's not civilized.
Hey, I've got incoming. Jason Ward was on last week. He said to tell you that he's listening, and also that you didn't seem to like him much. But I think I'd respond to not so much liking the interchange of conversation, and that's where we go towards this voluntary communication. And I think there was a misfire and a missed chance to connect. But you know what you're talking about in Syria, Chris. Hey, it's not that far from what's happening right here in America today. They just took some couple of ladies into custody here this last week. I guess they released them on Friday, but for taking pictures out in Bunkerville during that 2 years ago, last April the 12th. So I wonder when it becomes a crime to witness, to stand in the gap, stand as a witness, and be a voice in a witness, yeah, and stand there and take account. Because if this isn't allowed to happen, especially right here at home, what chance do we have? If you can't film cops, if you can't be there and witness their actions, what's the difference between here and Syria? So, hey, don't care about what's going on over there. You probably don't care about what's going on here. So,
well, yeah, we're not far away from being like what happens inside Syria, what the rebels or what ISIS does to people that are even nearby or try to even, to onlookers even. And of course, if you try to break up what they do to, like if you see brutality of what they're doing to the people, you see them brutalizing some innocent man or whatever, you try to break that up, they will probably kill you right there, or they're going to capture you and do something horrible. I mean, we're not too far away from becoming like Saudi Arabia or something like that, where minor offenses receive horrific. Well, it already happens, really. You see the same kind of things happen. Like some guy steals a $2 item out of a store or whatever, and then the man gets shot outside, and then the police they'll say, they'll go through all the normal excuses or whatever. Oh, I feared for my life. And then ultimately in the end, they'll say, well, he was committing the crime, so he wasn't completely in the right. Yes, but we don't kill people over minor offenses. We're not a medieval, uncivilized society. You can't do that anymore in the modern world. And I even see that on Facebook and stuff like that. Like I've seen when talking about the Michael Brown case. Well, and I brought up that, well, he literally stole $1 of merchandise. Did you really think that deserved the death penalty? Somebody responded under that comment section. It was on one of your pictures, Vince. When we were talking about I was talking about the need for a unification between the same kind of people that stood up for the Bundys and the same kind of people that stood up for the in Ferguson. And sometimes I see a lot in some of the militias and some of the people, so the protesters did go back and forth, and there was some unity between the two movements. But he ultimately said, the guy said, well, we don't need a place for these people in society, so I don't really care if the cop killed them, who's doing the job or whatever. If really that's our mentality, is that where people can just be called out of society like that for anything minor, then we're going almost into the eugenics Nazi standpoint, where people can be deemed unfit for society just like that, just like our fingers, and you are then killed, and then may possibly even people in your family in your gene pool are killed or whatever, or investigated into because they figure that you have the undesirable genes in you.
You know what?
And
Jason responds over here back on the post on Facebook. Oh Lord, he says we're a long way. We're a long ways from Syria. He says we aren't cowards running away from a fight, whether it be a local or international threat. I think what I'd like to respond to that in my reference to us being not so far from being like Syria is, I'm talking about the central control, the authority. Well, I'll tell you what, over there, they're probably like not apt to be ready to submit because they know exactly what's going to happen to them. Over here, people still will raise their hands out away from their body in surrender and be shot in the back. People are being held without bond because they stood in protest against the very thing that is happening to them now.
Yeah.
Thanks, James Kingsley. Thank you.
Yeah. Look what's happened in the country where, Lavoy Finicum, that he had his hands in the air, he surrendered. He's definitely at that point no threat. There's no way that he could The officer had to have known that he didn't have his gun on him, and I believe that the gun that was found near him when he was killed wasn't the gun that he owned. I think was planted on him, and it's the oldest New York cop trick that exists is to have a gun always. You always keep two guns, your own gun, you keep the gun in your pocket to plant on somebody if you accidentally kill somebody.
When I was a kid, I remember my cousin tell me a story. He was a canine cop in Tulsa. He said that they showed up on a scene one time, and when they rolled the guy's body over, he had a bunch of guns up under him. It's always been a common practice, or at least used to be, to carry a throwdown to plant. So as far as Lavoie's jacket, now I have the very same jacket right there. I'm looking straight at it, the inner pocket. I went, and a fellow over here on the video on Google, actually, I was pretty good. I think he was trolling me, but he really caused me to give clarification to what it was I was trying to say. The fact is that I have carried things in that pocket right there, in them inner pockets, and I know how the motion, how the bulge, how the sway would be. So when we see the video of Lavoie getting out of the vehicle, the cell phone video from within that truck, it's clear that there is nothing in that pocket. You see that left pocket right there. Now, as far as the gun, he did own a 9mm. There was reports that was a stolen gun from the serial number. There's also reports that he was shot 9 times, and it appears that the autopsy says 3. So there's a lot of information we can't know at this point, and hopefully it will become more clear. But I think it's quite obvious that they stuffed that pistol in there in his pocket, and whether it be one that I don't know what pistol it was. So
I don't know. There's this, also it just doesn't feel like that would be a gun you'd be carrying around in that situation. I mean, I know he owned that gun, 9mm or whatever, but these are militia members. Don't they pride themselves on having good weaponry? Don't you think he'd be carrying something a little bit more higher power? A little bit more of a finer firearm or something? In that kind of situation, in standoff with the federal authorities. And I just don't see, having a stolen firearm. It doesn't seem like something that a man that was what I've heard about Lavoie doesn't seem like something that was in his character. But of course, you can't gauge everything by that. But just doesn't seem like it. And it definitely seems like, again, something more like it seems to be more evidence of throwing down a firearm near him. I mean, it's the oldest trick in the book. And there was a lot of misinformation that came out shortly after, a lot of information that we still don't know, and probably might not ever know, because that's just how these things go. I mean, it's kind of like how we still don't really know a lot about the Waco situation, but all we do know at this point is that most of the evidence points that there was no reasoning for the siege to happen, and that's kind of like, even though this didn't end up as bad as Waco, still somebody did die. Still somebody else was shot. Ryan Bundy, and it was still violence, where it was sorted against people that weren't using violence. Just to have guns on them is not violence. That they were doing their constitutional duty. The government had to overreach their authority, and they were making a stand. And people in the activist community trashed them. Was the bad thing. And I see this lack of unity, and it's just by design. And you have I see you have the manipulators on both sides of the coin of the protesters throughout this country. We have these two different movements that's going on, and we have the Black Lives Matter people and what's going on in Ferguson and stuff like that. And then we have the other flip of the coin. We have Finnegan supporters, but really both those people are both the same size. They are fighting for the same thing. A lot of them. A lot of those people are out there first, and they're mad about the government, militarized police, the government. Sure, there were some looters and other things, but if you look at the other flip of the coin, there were bad people, racists and stuff like that were supporting. There was racists on both sides. There's just difference between a black guy that doesn't like white men, and there's a white man that doesn't like black guys. But ultimately, there was bad apples on both sides. But the core of the movement, a lot of the supporters, they were fighting for the same thing. And there's different attitudes also between the people on different issues. But again, we need to unite under the cause of government overreach and just the ultimate corruption that DC's became. And I really, people disagree with me on this quite a bit. But I think we definitely need to, any movement that happens in this country, any revolution in this country, we need to stress the big elephant in the room. Now, we can sit here all day and keep our eyes closed, but the design itself in the room. If we don't cut the ties to Israel, AIPAC, all the Israeli foreign policy think tanks in this country and stuff, and the fact that they have the biggest lobbying group in this country, AIPAC, we're going to end up in the same situation that we ended up before, because they can easily manipulate with some money people that would come to power later, or people that could overthrow the people that the people when we take the power in the future. So we definitely need a movement that's dedicated on no longer having a special relationship with Israel, and also we need to also not have a movement that we deny some of the obvious. Some people in the activist community don't really believe in conspiracy theories, and don't think that the Bilderberg Committee and the New World Order exists / really have much power. When they talk about the Bilderberg Committee, I think it's just a corporate hangout, a leisure time for the world's elites, but they don't think this is where the elites are plotting. Or also, more importantly, they are setting the prices and setting the economy. That's what's really going on. And that's what and if people break the prices, they're selling commodities and all the trends that they make. There's people like, for example, Hugo Chavez are targeting this. Hugo Chavez went against what the international elite standard for the price of oil was over the years, which they wanted probably what was like $80, $90 a barrel at that time. He was selling at $50 a barrel, putting out their partners, the Rothschilds and the British governments and all these Western forces partners, the Saudis, who are the main oil seller for the West. They were seriously cutting into their profits, so Venezuela became even further into the attack zone of the Bilderberg elites. But my point is, and to wrap this up shortly, is that we can't have we can't have it's hard to describe, but we definitely can't have a movement based on people that talk about certain issues. If you use the word tinfoil hatters and stuff like that, and yet you want to be part of the activist movement, it's very possible that you're not you're not helping the fact. And I think we need to accept all the different viewpoints, and we need to, for the most part, unify under just one or a few causes. But there's a few causes that are necessary, and the realization that there's these super elites at play that are not just, and we need to realize that the bigger picture, that these elites have the kind of power that they have their eyes set on world domination, and that there's designs in play, and there's, of course, the corruption and the overreach of our own government. Then when we look at the whole equation, then we can actually attack all parts of the equation and actually do something like what has happened in a few countries around the world, and like what they did in Iceland for a short time. It's really funny that these Panama Papers come out, and that the Icelandic prime minister that jailed the bankers, they're going to say that he's the one that's laundering money and stuff like that. So now he's it looks like he's resigned. Now after his resignation, people will ask me his name. I know it's just also really hard to pronounce. If you want to do a tongue twister, that's a really good drinking game actually, and it's a really bad cycle that'll start. I'm just saying is that if you want a good drinking game, and I've created I just thought of it right now during the show. The game is you either pick Icelandic politicians or Icelandic cities, and you and your buddies sit around, and everybody takes a turn. You can At first you can pick some easier ones or whatever, but if you mispronounce it, you have to take a drink, and then you can see where this is going. And as you get more drunk, it's going to be even harder to pronounce these politicians or cities. And I don't know where I guess if you mispronounce 20, if you mispronounce 20, you only take a sip every time. And then once you mispronounce 20, you're out of the game. And then whoever is the last one out wins. It's also like that. It seems like a recipe for disaster. But in Iceland, they probably do some games like that. They're really known for their partying over there because they have 20 hours of sunshine for parts of the year. So, they have 20 hours of darkness. That's what it is. So they have a lot of time to be inside and have party games and stuff like that. Because it's not sunny for a lot of the time there. But Iceland, they were very successful for a while, being able to overthrow those bankers and put them in jail. And they actually sold off their banks and gave the money to the people. But in the long run, they just end up they end up getting fooled by these Panama Papers, which the Panama Papers and McPutnam called it out, and a few other. What really was suspicious to me is that there wasn't all these people who were getting called out: Gaddafi, Assad, Putin, the Islamic Prime Minister. They all seem to be enemies of the Rothschilds. That's four countries right there that either didn't or doesn't have a Rothschild bank, and their head is the states. And now that there's talks to
it's 9/11. It's 9/11 here. Can I interrupt you a minute and then bring you some from chat?
Yeah.
Okay. John Teeter is here. Shout out Nathan Frazier coming up next here in about 50 minutes. He says, John says the problem with both sides, going back to infighting here that you'd say in the States, the Patriot movement and Black Lives Matter, is that they're looking to federal government to suppress the other side. The very government they're supposed to be against. It's insane. I really think I disagree with that statement. Not sure about from the Black Lives Matters, but from the Patriot movement, they're trying to call to task these people that are in office, that they're in these seats of decision, that they apply their office as it was intended, and not to play into this cronyism. So this is the premise there. The constitutional deal. These are a whole lot of matters to that we can look at separately, but mainly look. The black man's the shackled runner. Social engineering has created the ghetto. The drugs, all that stuff, it's all comes from the same control. Now, I would argue for the Patriot movement, at least they're trying to hold to that which the government is supposed to, and the Constitution is supposed to contain the government, right? I wish I'd have wrote that down, how Hal Anthony said it earlier today. But to be able to identify and show cause against these people, the very same thing that I've heard this theme 2 or 3 times today. So it's not that hard an idea to say these people that are using these forces against people unjustly. I don't care if you're black or a cowboy or a black cowboy. I've done cowboying in my days and worked black cowboy. But that's all beside the point, right? Yeah, we've got to start looking to see where we're on the same issue.
Well, I have to admit is that I think there's people on both sides. I see what he's talking about, because the Patriot movement, you are referring to the people that are actually the legitimate Patriot movement. But there's also the people, like I said, there's the bad apples on both sides, and some of the people in the Patriot movement are not really devoted to liberty. They're more into the they're either actually it's really it's more like they're from far right militias and stuff like that. I mean, I think there's some racist elements that gets mixed into it, and there's the same thing on the other side. The new Black Panthers on their side.
Let me back up on that then. I'm sorry to interrupt you. Let me back up on that. You're absolutely right, and that makes sense. And yeah, so I agree, John. Yeah, I see your point. Thanks.
And these people, it's made the Patriot movement. The funny thing is sometimes they're not they're not getting the government necessarily to tone down the other side to go against the Black Lives Matter crowd or whatever. But sometimes they'll go to the Black Lives Matter protests themselves or whatever and try to shut it down with their own force, which I guess is really not much different. But yeah, I guess in a way it's better. Black Lives Matter, yeah, they definitely, some of them I see are just not really, they're not really activists in the first place. But the bad thing about Black Lives Matter, and I'm not talking about some of the core activists in the movement, but the problem is that's turned into more of a trendy thing because of that catchy hashtag. And I'll say it straight up. It's just there's a lot of people that weren't activists before and then just join because they think it's cool or whatever, and they're not really educated on the issues, and they take viewpoints that ultimately ends up into kind of just like the mainstream liberal crowd, and not to more of a radical anti-government like some of the people that are in it. I mean, I want to talk about it sucks that some of the people that I saw were more anti-government, like Colonel West or whatever. He's now a supporter of Bernie Sanders, which is really disappointing. It's like I never thought that he would support any presidential candidate, especially the way that you talked about Obama. When I see Bernie Sanders, I see a lot of the same characteristics of the run in 08 of Obama. Remember the hope and change, and now it's a future we can believe in, or the simplest one, the fuel to burn, which I just don't find it that I don't find it that catchy. They feel so unoriginal. It's like they took a saying from that's been used forever and then just changed one letter with it. I mean, it seems like one of the first things you'd think of when thinking of a catchy thing that's marketable. But the Bernie Sanders crowd is leaked into the Black Lives Matter, or even worse, the Hillary, Obama crowd or whatever. And then there's also as well mainstream politics is leaked into the Patriot crowd somewhat. Like, for example, I see some of those people on the Patriot crowd might be supporters of Huckabee or Trump or something like that, which both were establishment tools. And were they all? Well, one was because Huckabee's now out of the race, and one is because Donald Trump's very much in the race and even considered the front runner at this point. I believe this is a prediction, even though it doesn't really matter because all four of them, from what I've seen, are bought out and are going to do what the elite want. But what I've seen so far, I'm predicting that Trump won't be the Republican nominee again. I'm pretty sure it's going to be Ted Cruz. And it'll be Clinton, Cruz, and it's set up that way because, Cruz, people will say, well, yep, Cruz never stood a chance. No, he never had that much support, so Clinton won measly. And it'll be like a similar to like the Obama-McCain race or whatever. And then we're going to be stuck with Hillary Clinton and I'm pretty sure martial law is going to be declared under Hillary Clinton's presidency. There's so many good names though for Hillary Clinton. It'll be easy for us.
We're getting choppy again.
Hillary Clinton, Hillary Clinton, Hillary. I'm not going to say that on the radio right now. The one I was thinking of at the start was a C, but
she is so sexy with them cankles.
I'm supposed to be a Bill Clinton impersonation.
No, well, how about a Ronald Reagan?
Sound like a Bill Clinton. Sound like something Bill Clinton would say.
Well, I am in Arkansas. Good old Bubba. He's just misunderstood,
Oh yeah, well, what's going to happen when Hillary Clinton becomes president is that something tells me in the end, or Hillary's going to sleep with more chicks and more young interns than Bill did.
Have a cigar.
I mean, Hillary sometimes looks more like a dude than Bill. I mean, especially when she greases her hair back. She was doing that for a while. Now she's not doing that in the race. She has to make herself look more presentable and less slob-like. But for a while there, she really looked like a dude. And I was like, I don't know, but I think she's going to do the opposite of what Bruce Jenner did. Hillary's going to change her name to what would it be? Herman, like Herman Cain, Herman Clinton.
Oh my God!
And we're gonna.
Have you seen the picture, the composite between her and Bill, for Hillbilly?
Yeah,
Perfect.
Hillbilly.
They give hillbillies a bad name around here. I'm gonna tell you for sure.
Yeah, when I see that Bill Clinton's from Arkansas, I was like, damn it, like he really is Arkansas a bad name. It's almost like it's almost like all these like Jeb Bush, and when Jeb Bush and Rubio are running, and they're giving Florida just a terrible name. Which I mean, like we have, I mean, Florida is just a place of bizarre headlines, and we're just known for a mess in our trailer parks. That seems to be what Florida's known for at this point. It's kind of somewhat.
Bill Clinton was he's very charismatic. On my grandma's side, one of her cousins or something had worked way back when on his campaign, and when she had died, Bill Clinton called and talked to the family and everything. But he never forgot somebody. When he met somebody, he always remembered. I guess there was a lot of techniques involved in that and some mental practices. But Bill Clinton was very charismatic, and why that he's just a guy, doing what guys do, and the whole point was missed by the fact of his what all the criminal activity that they're all involved in. I mean, it's just complete cronyism, and the fact that Bush runs against Clinton is the biggest joke of all. I mean, they were partners in crime.
Well, Jeb Bush is done now, so I guess it's gonna be like practically a Bush loan against Clinton. I mean, Ted Cruz is very much like George Bush, and even the way they kind of act. And Ted Cruz is equally as alarming. I mean, if we're don't get me wrong that it's gonna be equally as bad either way. But Ted Cruz, he is so pro-Israel, it's alarming. I mean, this guy is. They even say that he would be the most pro-Israel candidate ever in the history. And it would a lot of the people in the Patriot movement would probably, unfortunately, join him. Because Cruz, until like about 2 years ago, was very popular in the libertarian crowd, and people even compared him to Ron Paul and stuff like that. But now Ron Paul has disowned him, which I really give him a lot of credit for, because he needed to do that. Because a lot of people that used to be in the Ron Paul crowd were joining into the Cruz crowd, and actually bought some of his rhetoric about the Cruz apparently at one time was supporting the flat tax and stuff like that, like the fair tax. The fair tax is one of Ron Paul's major plans, which the point of the fair tax wasn't really the way it was done. It was just that it would end the Federal Reserve 100% and the IRS. I don't think Cruz really saw it that way. He probably just had the IRS still taking the money and still all his buddies on Wall Street and stuff like that. So I'm like, because when we get taxed, what happens? Our money ultimately just ends up in the super rich's hands, because who runs the IRS and the Federal Reserve? All those big bankers and the Rothschilds ultimately are the ones that own the Federal Reserve in the long run. I mean, the most powerful members of the Federal Reserve, and they've been there since the beginning in 1913. It's changed. A couple people have changed, but the Rothschilds are always there, and that seems to be the case with a lot of world leaders and stuff like that. Is that, well, the names might change, but ultimately the Rothschilds are still there throughout the hundreds of years that they've been around, and it's possible that they might have been around even longer. It's just that's when they officially took the name Rothschild, which is a made-up name anyways. It means red shield in German, and that was all the way back in the 1500s when they started showing up. And then they've been the world's richest people for a long time. Anyways, if anybody wants to call in, 718-717-8296, 718-717-8296, here at Voice of Rebellion Radio. People, I feel like they were this thing theory, and they're just saying, well, that's just life there. So all this horrific stuff that happens to them, well, it's not that big of a deal. It seems to be like a tragedy, like level. How sad you're supposed to be whenever something happens in whatever country, and like Syria's like a 0.2. I mean, it's like one of the lowest in the world when it comes to Americans' reactions, and you say that something bad happened in Syria. And there's other countries, like for example, like France. Shit, that's like an 8.7 or something like that. You know, the only way that it can get more sour than that is it either happens in the United States or Britain. They're like number 3. And then there's like some countries that are like somewhat you're supposed to care for like 12 hours. Man, you're supposed to act like you're sad if somebody brings it up, or may put one status about it on Facebook, like if it happens to me, perhaps like would it say I would say Slovenia or something, or not even those European Eastern Europe. That's where it starts to fade out, because once you get to Russia, the people don't care at all. Really, it's like a 1.2 on that scale. Like when that subway attack happened and like 30 people died in Russia, nobody cared here in the United States. You didn't see any changes to Russian flag profile pictures or anything like that. Of course, that wouldn't fit with the elite's agenda, because there would be solidarity between the Russian and American people. But then when the Charlie Hebdo thing happened, everybody was like, J.C. was Charlie, J.C. was Charlie. And J.C. was the whole Charlie Hebdo thing is that I disagree with people attacking a political cartoonist because of what they say, but I'll never say J.C. was Charlie. I'll never say that I'm supporting Charlie Hebdo. Charlie Hebdo is a sick motherfucker. Who puts horrible images, making fun of stuff that's not even remotely funny. They're just absolutely horrible tragedies. And then when terror struck Russia, he put a cartoonist pic making fun of the plane that went down over Egypt that was attacked by ISIS. Even that he was attacked, his newspaper was attacked by the same group. He showed absolutely no solidarity when the Russian people are attacked on that plane. Hanging over Egypt. It was a recent one. It's over 200 people died, and nobody really talked about it, because then just 3 weeks later we have the other Paris attacks, 11, 13, 15, which I think that was I don't think that was just a coincidence that happened on that day, Friday the 13th, 11, 13, 15. There's a marketable aspect about that. I think they do things on certain dates. Somewhat just because people will remember that. People will remember, 11, 13, 15. It sticks in your mind so easily, and it'll always stick in my mind. It was partially stick in my mind because of the fact that I was not even in the country when it happened. I was like, holy shit, what did I miss? I heard something about a terror attack. My family was talking about it in Colombia, and I turned on the TV next day. I see all this shit on the news about how many, over 100 people were killed. And the ridiculous thing about that was that this movie, for one thing, you have this a band called Eagles of Death playing, which I don't know. It seems like some kind of sounds like some kind of message is being brought across there. And then they even said, the band members eventually fessed up and said, "Oh yeah, I think the bodyguards might have been involved in it." And there was an eyewitness account saying, it's like, wait, what are you talking about? These aren't Middle Easterners. They just said 3 white men and stuff like that. White men were doing it. So these were probably like French security officials, or maybe even Mossad that was involved in it, because Israelis generally look pretty white because they are just Europeans that moved into the supposedly the Jewish land, when it's really Palestinian land. And they weren't even connected to the biblical Jews, many of the Jews that moved to Israel. They were just European Jews that converted during the Khazarian period. People don't even know what the fuck Khazaria is. Whenever it's like there's certain words that you probably bring up and you just sound like a pretentious douche, like if you brought it up in public. That's something I noticed. You gotta watch when you're bringing up a certain topics. Is that if you come off acting like you can't come off as you're much smarter than the person that you're trying to convince of that, because then they'll just think that you're just trying to be pretentious or trying to act like you're a know-it-all, and they're gonna reject your message.
Is that found? What aisle is that, in the supermarket, or pretentious douche next to Summer's Eve? Is that next to Summer's Eve? Pretentious.
Yeah.
Hey, I gotta go back out. Sorry, Jason. I am currently out of logical fallacy awards, but hey, I will put those on back order. He says you ain't got a brain. Now, come on, really? This young man, 18 years old, obviously has a brain. Okay, so
I never heard that one before. I mean, usually people can see that to me at least, is that they at least think that I have a high intelligence. But I don't even try to think of it that way because I don't really think of myself as really that smart. I just think of myself that devotes a lot of time to reading and on my own time. For example, and it just it depends on the subject. I mean, it's like I was pretty good in school or whatever, which was just ultimately what I saw of it at the end, just indoctrination and people giving you the stomach their lies. But in like in classes, for example, math, I wasn't exactly a genius that made you think I would be in that class. But then it becomes like social studies or history or something like that. I would school them about how much bullshit that was, especially like in government economics. I would just I think one time I mentioned a couple times about Israel. And I just got like shut down when I think I mentioned something about Israel supporting ISIS one time. I definitely mentioned the United States supporting ISIS in that class, and just the teacher just didn't even. There was like what he would do. He wouldn't even like say, "Oh yeah, you're crazy," or "Oh yeah, no, it's not true." He wouldn't do any of that. He just would just like pretend like I wasn't talking. Like I think he made it was like the Charlie Brown thing or whatever. Like he saw me talking and he just went wah 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 wah. He just tuned me out completely. He probably I don't know. I don't even. He really doesn't seem to be that great of a teacher or whatever in the long run because he just said whatever the textbook said. So I don't know what exactly he was in it for. Was he just thinking about he probably just thinking, when am I going to get out of here? When am I going to? He did the cross country. He probably was like thinking, oh yeah, I'm going to get to see those cross country girls run later. That's probably what that's why he was in it. That's what he was in it for. That's all he cared about. He didn't care about actually teaching anything of substance. He just wanted to see the cross country girls later. Yeah, and to say I don't have a brain. Also here's the thing I want to say to Jason before he completely leaves the chat room or something is that don't get me wrong. Is that I'm not going to say that I was completely liking having you on as a caller. I didn't like what you were saying. I was okay with you as a person. I didn't see anything really too wrong with that. I just didn't like what you were. I didn't like the logical fallacies in your statements. I was trying to call you out upon it, and then you kind of cut me off. You wouldn't let me talk really, and then I wasn't really able to say the mouth off completely what I was trying to say, and actually prove your points wrong. And when you don't let me talk, it's gonna escalate the situation somewhat. But I don't even know you, so how can I not really like you? We just had a conversation on the phone for 30 minutes or whatever. Actually, it was like 45 minutes. It was a pretty long conversation. It was like from 9:45 to 10:30 last time, and we're already at that point in the show already where we were wrapping up last time. That's crazy how quick the time goes by for the show. Especially when you have a conversation going or whatever. And even like the little conversation that me and Vince had during the show has made this show seem to go by a little bit quicker. I'm looking definitely for more callers down the long and some of these shows coming down the next few weeks. It's crazy to think they're already going to be in May. Here, that means that once it gets to May, that means it's been like a year since I was at Stable Radio. And I was only getting a few listeners here and there, and it went from that to this. And I want to give a shout out everybody to UCY, Real Liberty Media, Freedom News, and all the other places we're at. Thanks for listening.
Freedom's Network, yeah, and reallibertymedia.com. Redirect right here to UCY.tv. I post Voice of Rebellion and show now over there, and drops a link in to click on Channel 6 at Real Liberty Media, brings you to UCY.tv, to the chat room right here. You're listening downstream. Come on back and join the conversation. Yeah, and if you're looking for a social network site, Freedom's Network is the new social network there for Real Liberty Media, and you'd be welcome to join. It is secured with that whatever HTTPS there, so a secure site. And it looks like Bo Diddy and Grimner are doing a real great job there. And hey, by the way, my very first broadcast at UCY.TV, back in May in 2013. I'm going to rebroadcast that next Friday. So I'm going to be taking the next 2 weeks off, and I'm going to play the first and last of What Matters Worldwide out of about 65 episodes. And I'm going to get out and do some gardening. I'll still be doing the production on Saturday and Sunday and connecting those voices. Speaking of which, I was just thinking earlier, I ought to get a hold of Paul Tapetti and try to see if he would, I bet he would, come on and do an interview with you. Be very interesting.
Yeah, that would be really cool to have have the other person that. So, what, you produce for his show as well, or is that?
No. That's no. It's just somebody that of all the great voices that I've connected with out there, I consider him to be one of them. Some people might consider him to be some bit extreme, but I say sometimes extreme measures are called for. So, yeah. Kira, On the Bridge with Kira on Saturdays, simulcast Real Liberty Media, assistant producer with her, and then your show, and then just all the folks. For me, it's a great honor to be able to work with so many great folks and to be able to bring all these voices together. And for me, the world makes sense. So I think my journey has brought me out of as much as possible a biased view of the world and how it works. I've certainly changed my perspective these last few years. A great shout out to Jules for UCY.TV. So many, such a great array of folks here with so many good things to say. This definitely goes in the annals of history of one of the greatest collections of voices ever to be brought together. So my appreciation for all her hard work and all the people that come aboard and make it all possible as well.
Well, yeah, that's a lot of people that I've done also to work with on the radio over times, and people that I've either interviewed or people that over the years that I just brought on as a caller to whatever, and it's definitely cool to get all this perspectives from all over the place. I was thinking that soon, I haven't done in a while. I haven't done since what was that, September or something like that, when I went on did a Spanish show. Probably should do a Spanish show again sometime. But I mean, the 2 hours, that's a long time for me to be talking Spanish, because I don't, it's like having this, it's like a whole different experience, because I don't speak in Spanish that much. And then to do it on a radio show, it's like doing a radio. It's like when you're on your first radio shows. It's like all those 120 episodes of radio that you've done. It's like starting all over again, and being at only episode number 3 or 4 or whatever. Now when you're already done 120 so episodes on the radio in English, when you do a radio show, it's just like it just cruise right through. You know what to do. How to format it. Spanish, it's a little bit different. And for example, stuff doesn't even flow the same way in Spanish. But definitely, everybody, you can check that out when it happens. Spanish listeners, just keep an eye out.
Jorge Holmes, ¿qué onda, güey?
Yeah, you actually took over on that show because we had so many technical difficulties. And I don't know how that exactly worked down the long run, but I remember the Spanish that you were speaking during the show. That was pretty funny.
Yeah, my friend Jose used to be my second-hour co-host. He laughs at my accent when I talk to him in Spanish.
Well, I mean, usually you see sometimes regular American accents, but there is a difference. You got a Dixie accent on that going on in Spanish.
Pinches güeros, culeros.
It's like you're attempting to put a Mexican twang on it or something like that, but it just sounds like some southern boy trying to imitate a Mexican or something.
Well, I gotta call myself a redneck hillbilly southern fried slice of country with with a western swing and a bit of salsa. Might be an omelet. I don't know. I've been called scrambled before, anyways.
Yes. It was funny. I started learning a third language now. I'm actually on my. I started learning Russian recently. I think I mentioned on the show before, but I was actually apparently I've actually don't even have that much of an accent. I've actually been able to, which is funny because even in Spanish I have, which is a language that I've known for quite a while, and I've really known some for all my life. But yet I still have sounds somewhat American when I speak it. But when I speak Russian, a language I didn't start learning until just recently, I apparently can get I can get the tone pretty well down of Russian.
Привет.
Get deep, like you're talking from your stomach.
Привет. That's a hello in Russian, and sukra. Look up sukra, what that means. I think
I
it
know what
really
that
doesn't
means.
quite translate across to American, but
Yeah, I know it actually translates quite well. Suka. It's just
yeah, pretentious douche. I think it's pretentious douche. This is a translation.
That's pretty much it. Yeah, it's not far. It could be interchanged. Yeah, that'd be funny. Just look it up and Google Translate, and that comes up right there. It's like, okay, CYKA, and then pretentious douche. That's what it comes up to. Okay. Yeah. I'm going to go back on the topic here. For all the people that need some information on Syria, and why not get it from some actual Syrian sources? I mean, there's a few on Facebook that I'm going to recommend right here. Syria News is one. You can translate. You have to translate that though. They put in like Arabic, and you have to translate that to English. But I mean, with Google Translate nowadays, really especially not being in English, it's not too big of a deal because usually with Google Translate, sometimes it comes out to be almost exact. Or the other translated websites, if you don't want to use Google Translate, there's quite a few of them. I mean, just look it up, the translation Arabic to English. And since that's one that translates pretty easily because there's a lot of people that do speak Arabic. It's not like there's just a few people like Farsi. That's a hard one. Like if you want to go to like some Iranian website and then to translate that over, it's not going to come out that good because there's not that many people that work on translating Farsi to English. But with Arabic, I mean, the language is spoken 20-something countries. There's tons of people that translate back and forth those languages, and some of those countries speak a lot of English for different reasons. For example, Libya might speak quite a bit of English. Some Libyans, especially ones living by the coast, because they had a lot of British tourists over the years, which is very ironic that in the end, Britain would betray him so heavily during and Cameron would be a major part of taking out Gaddafi when his people used to pick that as one of their top vacation spots for many years. They used to go to Libya. They used to be, and it was a beautiful vacation spot. It was like going to it was like their Cancun or something like that. It was Libya, and in the long run, they would bomb the shit out of it and take out Gaddafi, and then and Britain was very heavily behind that. I mean, they were probably the most responsible, or maybe second most responsible European country. When of course the United States have a lot more larger partner responsibility in Israel and some of the Gulf states because they were doing the same thing there. The Libyan rebels, there was mass the same way. They're saying, that there's these moderate Libyan rebels. They pretty much they had almost the same rhetoric, the same game plan when it comes to how they would lie to us between the Syrian war and the Libyan war. And they say, this started as peaceful demonstrations, but they had to go to violent means and they had to start a rebellion. But what you really mean is that there was just a certain point where we decided that we're going to go to a violent insurgency and we're going to fund it. And that's what happened in Libya. And within just a few months was the difference. And because they went full out, NATO bombed the shit out of Libya. NATO came in almost immediately and did what they couldn't do in '86, or what the United States couldn't do in '86. Remember that Libya was often targeted on the news back then. They actually killed, I think, Gaddafi's brother, or killed one of Gaddafi's sons, I believe. It was Gaddafi's brother, I believe, that was killed in '86. And then that killed like three of his sons during the 2011 war, and they killed Gaddafi himself. Right now, they're still probably maybe one that's most likely to lead in the future of the Qaddafi's might be Hannibal Qaddafi, who worked in the Libyan government. I wouldn't say the other ones. One was actually a soccer player, and who actually made like Italian professional soccer. He was that good, but ultimately he went back to Libya, and then there's the Libyan rebels or whatever. They try to discredit him, and then they try to say they're the best accusation they could come up against him is that they said that he was a closet gay or whatever, and I guess over there in North Africa, in the Middle Eastern world, it's a much bigger deal than in Europe or something. So, but he really didn't end up becoming as big of a deal. I think, like for example, a lot of the Libyan people still support him, and they realize it's just a major distraction compared to what the Libyan insurgents were doing, and what they're still doing. They're still beheading Christians and stuff like that. And now that the country's been practically handed over to ISIS, there's no hiding that. And Libya is in complete shatters. One piece is controlled by ISIS, another piece is controlled by the rebels, and another piece is controlled by it's all again like the same kind of groups, all different flavors of terrorism. The one's being controlled by the supposed moderate rebels, one's big piece is being controlled by ISIS, including Gaddafi's hometown. Another piece is being controlled by this other faction that's trying to fight for the government power, and then there's the only make good guys in the whole scenario, which is probably the Qaddafiists. They've been fighting ever since Gaddafi fell from power in 2011. It's almost hard to believe that it's been 5 years almost since Gaddafi was killed. He was killed on October 20th, 2011. I remember that day pretty clearly, because at first it wasn't clear whether Gaddafi had been killed or not, and then later it became very clear that Gaddafi had been killed in combat, or not in combat, but he had been killed by being captured. He had been captured by the Libyan military,
brutalized
Libyan
and mutilated. It was terrible. What a terrible death.
Yeah, it was horrible. He was well. They put it on video, and so the whole world saw it happen. And they did. Actually, what was going on at the end? What was not known about is that his forces were actually protecting, or actually no, they weren't able to protect. And let's say there was this forget about Gaddafi, helped the black Libyan minority there that were heavily repressed by the militants, and the black Libyans were actually seen being hung, or they were seen had been hanged there, and in that city, and that was one of the things that they were doing. And Gaddafi went to his hometown, but then they found him there. They found the rebels had found him there, and then he got his bodyguards and him got in a few trucks. I think they tried to flee town. However, they kept chasing them, and then at some point they were able to, I guess, kill his bodyguards, and then they took him and loaded him in the back of the truck. That's after the capture, and they tortured him. They did the famous thing with the knife, and after that, at some point, I guess, they killed him, or they eventually just succumbed from all the injuries from the beating and the mutilation by the knife that they had done, and they threw his body out in the middle of the desert somewhere. They said it was buried at some undisclosed location, kind of like what happened to Che at the end. Che was thrown in the middle of the jungle, but they found him actually. So, 31 years later, I believe they found him in '98, I think, and they returned him to Cuba, which I think was only was only fitting in the long run, because I think that ultimately he had made Cuba somewhat of a second home. I hope just for the Gaddafi's family's sake that they find Gaddafi, and then they can respect his Gaddafi's body and actually bring him back to Sirte or something. But right now Sirte is controlled by ISIS, and that's the sad thing, is that a lot of the things that also Gaddafi's very well wrote piece of literature, the Green Book, was all of them were burnt practically in that in the center of the green for the center for they actually had like a building dedicated to the book he wrote, and they had a ton of them in there, and they burnt them all. So a lot of the legacy and all that history and all that progress was like gone overnight, and he was able to do the impossible practically, almost was able to do what was seen by everybody as impossible, which is unite Africa and actually remove colonialism from Africa and get them all under one currency that wouldn't be on the Rothschilds. And that's when they decided to kill him, and they put him. They threw him out in the middle of the desert. They had their rebels do the bidding. But look what's left in Libya. It's a complete disaster, and they're still fighting. It's complete. There's really no order whatsoever, and the Libyan people are suffering terribly. And a lot of them, I think, had to leave, and they became refugees, and they went to Europe. And then the Europeans will have the European governments. That's what's really bad. The European governments will have the right to, or have the nerve to complain that refugees are taking over their country, that there's too many refugees heading on their way when they did do the bombings that are caused refugees to have to go somewhere. Now, I realize that there's somewhat of a different hidden agenda, I guess, with like Turkey pushing the refugees. They don't want the refugees. So they're like pushing them on European countries. They're pushing them on Germany, Finland, and stuff like that. And there's some people that I think they're not even from Syria. They're like sneaking their way through. But there's also a lot of good people that are leaving Syria or had to leave Libya, and now there's people that have to leave Syria that are trying to find an escape from that horrible mess that's been created in both countries. Now the only difference is that Assad may stay and may can fix the mess. Libya without the Gaddafi in power, it's very unlikely that they're ever going to be able to fix anything. I mean, like, unless his loyalists may take power, they're going to have a huge mess that they're going to inherit. It's going to be a very slow, painful rebuilding process from what Libya, compared to what they were in 2011. It was a beautiful Tripoli that was completely decimated, practically. Benghazi, which was actually didn't have the name it is now. Benghazi was actually a decent city as well. Now Benghazi synonymous with a terror attack that killed 4 Americans, and our government covered it up. And the most alarming thing that was covered up was not about the emails and all that. The most alarming thing that was covered up was the fact that why didn't anybody in Congress stand up and say, hey, wait a minute, why were we funding these guys in the first place? Why did we fund these guys against Gaddafi? You didn't see anybody in Congress do that. Just say those simple words. Because practically all of them were in unanimous support for it. So I guess now it would look a little bit hypocritical, I guess, to do that. But you didn't see. I think some of them alluded to that, but nobody really yelled it blatantly. I know there's some people that are more that actually want to open up that can of worms somewhat and reveal the truth to an extent on Benghazi. Was it? I think that Trey Dowdy or whatever, I think he somewhat was interested in what really happened. Or every now and then, some Congress people will do something like that, but then they're almost immediately shut up once they actually ask for whatever investigation to be done against the government action or against the government atrocity. But what we see in Libya, right now, if it doesn't change for Syria, that's what's going to happen. Is that Syria will become another Libya, and that's what Putin, that's what Assad's warned us about, and many others have warned us of the possibility of that. And now we're in the last few minutes of the show, so I'm going to wrap this up here, and also lead off with what's the finishing thought about that is that. Well, with the last 2 shows, I just want to give a shout-out to the man that was able to call me brainless on the chat room. It was like, it really, I mean, I guess it was almost better that you did it there. I called in and wasted time on the show. But all I got to say is that I didn't. It's not like I disliked you. I just liked what you had to say, and I tried to write you on what you were saying, and you weren't very receptive to that. That's all I got to say about that. Definitely callers don't take what happened there as a reason why not to call it. Take that as a reason to call, because I will debate you or I will have a very good dialogue with you anytime when you call in.
Hey, bud.
What do you want to say?
Yeah, I think it's really important that we try to communicate better. And if you want to call into a radio show, then let's try to listen to one another. So yeah, I agree. Hey, before we run out, let me give a shout out to Nathan Frazier, Live Free FM, Anarchopreneur, coming up next year at UCY.tv. And I really want to read this. He shared this post from Amanda, and it's a bit of a poem. So let me just read it, or see if I can. Taxes land, taxes wage, taxes bed in which he lays, taxes tractor, taxes mule, teach him taxes is the rule. Taxes cow, taxes goat, taxes pants, taxes coat, taxes ties, taxes shirt, taxes work, taxes dirt. Taxes chew, taxes smoke, tax him, teach him taxes are no joke, taxes car, taxes grass, tax the roads he must pass, taxes food, taxes drink, tax him if he tries to think. Taxes sodas, taxes beers, if he cries, taxes tears, taxes bills, taxes gas, taxes notes, taxes cash. Tax him good and let him know that after taxes, he has no dough. If he hollers, tax him mo, tax him until he's good and sore. Tax his coffin, tax his grave, tax the sod in which he lays. Put these words upon his tomb. Taxes drove me to my doom. And when he's gone, we won't relax. We'll still be here after the inheritance tax. Not sure who wrote that.
I gotta say that's a bravo on that one. That was again. I just thought of another. That's another drinking game was that. See how well you can say that. Every time you mess up on that, you have to, until you get it right, you have to take either a shot or a hit from the bong. That's a good party game right there. So you can see,
hey, the bong, you're bound to get it right with the bong, but the bottle is gonna get you every time. Yeah. So tomorrow's tax day. April 15th was. I guess they decided to be so gracious and kind as to
give us 3 more days. Yeah, the holiday that they are observing they're observed on Friday. I know that. Luckily last year it didn't have anything that it has to be taxed. But next year I'll get the very great luxury of doing my own taxes, which I mean, hopefully by that point I will be off the grid around the country or something like that. Hopefully, because I just know that it's going to be pretty hard to actually fill out those forms, and you know that money's going to. It's either going to the U.S. war machine, or it's going to the, or it's going to the super rich for their whatever that they want, practically just their personal money. That's how it works out in the long run. It's a redistribution of wealth from the poor and the middle class, where they really take the bulk of it, to the super rich, and we don't get anything in return. Just some crappy public schools and roads that are never fixed. Well, my roads, yeah. We as a country have our infrastructure falling apart. We have places that look like Detroit. We don't just have one Detroit. We have a few cities that are in this country that are really falling apart. But yet we can get $5 billion to Israel. Perfect logic. Well, that's the logic of the Zionists, is that apparently we can cough that up. But the show's coming to an end. It is already 10:58. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in. Follow me on Facebook. Yeah, I know that's weird saying follow me on Facebook. But yeah, subscribe on Facebook, Chris Jackson Rojas. Also, next week there's a 70% chance for having a guest next week, because I have 2 people lined up. One of them will get the chance.
Point of no return and nobody can stop it. Malcolm Little, when he knelt before Elijah Muhammad, the comet that killed the dinosaurs, changing the earth. They love to criticize, they always say I changed for the worse. Like prescription pills when you misusing them, nigga. The Templar Knights when they took Jerusalem, nigga, and figured out what was buried under Solomon's temple, Al-Aqsa. The name is not coincidental. I know too much, the government is trying to murder me. No coming back like cutting your wrists open vertically. How could the serpent be purposely put in charge of the country? Genetic genetic engineered sickness spread amongst me. My people are so hungry that they attack without reason, like a fucking dog ripping off the hand that feeds them. Immortal technique is treason to the Patriot Act. So come and get me, motherfucker, cause I'm not coming back. This is the point from which I can never return if I back down.
My name